It's almost impossible to have been a young person and not had some of your digital life before the internet impacted by this man. Gary Knell was the CEO of Sesame Street and has great stories to tell about Big Bird and Kermit, but he's not going to do that today. He is going to talk about media and the power of young people in facilitating change. Gary, take it away.
Thank you, Steve, and hi, everybody. And I know being the speaker between, you and lunch is always not the place you want to be. Um, but I'm gonna give a slightly different perspective, relatively quickly here, so we can get to the students. This has been an amazing day so far. Steve, you've lined up some really incredible speakers who have only been outdone by the students who we've been able to interact with. And I think this intergenerational discipline is super important, by the way. And running media companies, it's something that, as I mentioned, one of the breakout groups, having reverse mentoring as a digital immigrant, um, being able to understand from you guys who have grown up with all of these technologies and are native to them, having a way in which we can use this to solve problems. So I want to just set the stage quickly and just give you a little bit. Let's step back for a few minutes about change and disruption. There's always been change and disruption. New technology has upended society since the Industrial Revolution. So we go back 150 years. We probably go back even further than that. Whenever technology has entered society, there's just massive upheaval, there's massive disruption, there's often revolutions that come out of that. And I think we're living through I don't know which inning it is in the baseball game here, but I think we're certainly in maybe the middle innings, if on the revolution that we have um, created with digitally, which is no, no less important than the Industrial Revolution was in 1900. And it's just a massive set of disruptions. And today we are living through a social revolution at the same time. My good friend Kirk Johnson, who runs the Natural History Museum for the Smithsonian in Washington, likes to talk about a really interesting time capsule, which I love. And if you look at someone like me and perhaps others here, or perhaps your parents, my grandparents were born in the 19th century. And we may have known a great grandparent who was born back in the late 19th century. And I'm going to know my grandchildren and perhaps a great grandchild who will go into the 22nd century. Perhaps some of you will as well. So, in my footprint, if you think about this on planet Earth, is going to go from the 19th century to the 22nd century. It's a really interesting way of thinking about where we exist in human existence, as we also face a world today, which you are inheriting from us, where we had 1 billion people on the planet in 1800. We had 2 billion people on the planet in 1900. And I think most of you saw last week, we hit the 8 billion people mark. There are twice as many people on this planet since the day I graduated high school, which wasn't that long ago. Twice as many people. So, one of the existential questions is how are we going to feed all these people, provide energy for them, educate them, and house them without burning up everything in or on the planet? And at the end of the day, this this is in many ways the existential question of climate change, but it's also really about sustainability, which I think is also one of the key components, Steve, of today's event. And I would argue that you guys do have the power. would also agree with some of the previous speakers that adults created these problems and adults need to sort them out, so to speak. That is true. But I think at the end of the day, some of it's going to get sorted out. Human history never sorts its shit out at the end of the day, totally. It's part of the human existence. And it is really about innovators who do take things. They take things politically, they take things technologically, they innovate, they make change happen. And that is the nature of our existence. Um, Sylvia Earle, the fantastic oceanographer who I'm so lucky to call a friend, is now in her 90s. And she talks about this is the best time to be alive because we have in our hands the tools to change our trajectory and promote sustainability. In her case, it's about preserving and saving the oceans, which is a huge set of challenges worthy of another discussion. But we have those abilities today, which we didn't have in 1950 or in 1920 or in 1970. If you look at how medicine has expanded, even in the last 20 or 30 years, brain medicine, incredible innovations have taken place. So I would argue that you do have the power. You will have those skills. And I would focus today, because we're talking about media. In my view, media is really about storytelling. And at the end of the day, it is the most powerful way to change behaviors. Our world is filled with heroes and villains, victims and perpetrators, which play out every single day in the news, in movies, in television shows, and perhaps even in TikTok videos. All you have to do is look at Marvel and Star Wars and see how popular they are in everyday life. And even in the political realm of Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, MAGA, and Trump, all of these things are really still versions of the human drama of heroes and villains, victims and perpetrators, which gets sorted out through storytelling at the end of the day. So you may know from my bio here on the page that I worked at Sesame Street, which I hope many of you grew up with. I can do a Muppet Q&A later, Steve, if you ever want to do that. But Sesame Street was revolutionary, just the way social media is revolutionary today. When I was growing up in the 60s, which we watched Saturday morning kids programming, that was like the only day you could watch kids programming, and it was filled with commercials for sugar sweetened cereal and Chef Boyardee canned pasta. I can still sing some of the songs from those jingles that took place there. The founder of Sesame Street, Joan Gans Cooney, had a vision, which was, why don't we take the power of these advertising slogans that are used to sell cereal and teach kids letters and numbers, and to try to bridge the education gap that exists at the time and still exists, but existed in the United States between those who had the resources to have early childhood education and those who didn't. And Sesame Street was a revolutionary idea of closing that education gap by using the power of advertising. Fast pace, bright objects, loud, urban, diverse. This show was banned in the state of Mississippi the first year because it showed a diverse audience of brown people and black people and big yellow canaries and green grouches and other people living together in harmony, working through their issues. And so it was wildly controversial. It was also controversial by people in many ways saying, oh, this is going to ruin kids' brains. Technology is the enemy. Television is the vast wasteland, as the FCC chairman called it back then. And in many ways it was. And the question that Joan posed was, kids are going to watch television. It's not a question of does it teach, It's a question of what does it teach? So can we harness and get people who care about future solutions to issues? Can we create a vision, a curriculum, if you will, around social and emotional learning, around promoting diversity, around promoting basic reading, writing, and mathematics skills? Can we incorporate these into a technological base that kids are going to go to anyway? And instead of running away from it or turning the TV off, let's figure out a way to harness the power of this educator. And we, in many ways, I would argue we have the same challenge today with social media. It's more complicated, it's more diverse, it has fewer checkpoints and middle persons who can edit and critique things, but it is out there now. If you look at since 1970, look at all the changes that are in the society. You guys weren't around when we didn't have to wear seatbelts in cars, and millions of people died because they weren't wearing seatbelts. Or tobacco use. We Some of us on this call can remember TV commercials for cigarettes, which were in our lives every single day. Most of our parents smoked 1 or 2 packs a day of cigarettes, which were promoted by celebrities, the way you would see things today promoted by celebrities. Recycling, again, and a lot of these issues were changed, I would argue, by kids driving those agendas, by getting people at the ad council and others to create stories and educate kids who then really hammered their parents to buckle their seatbelts, to stop using tobacco, to recycle. There are problems in the world which do get better. And part of it, or clean air, where I grew up in Los Angeles, we couldn't breathe when I was in middle school. It's not solved, but it's a heck of a lot better today. Problems do get solved, and I would argue a lot of it had to do with changing the narratives and pushing forward and enabling kids to have their say. As Neil deGrasse Tyson, who some of you know, the great astronomer at the Hayden Planetarium over on Columbus Avenue and 83rd Street, likes to say, kids are natural born scientists. It's adults that drum it out of them. If you throw any child into a backyard or a park, they will immediately go towards the bugs, birds, and every other critter that's there before they're told to stay away. Those are scary places. We need to let kids be kids here, and we need to give them the tools to create, in a way, the curriculum for the future that's going to solve these problems. So if you look at something like climate change and sustainability, I would argue there isn't actually a lot of debate anymore about the science. There's a few nutcases out there who are there's always gonna be nutcases, by the way, who are throwing things around. But uh, but now it's really about creating a society that we can overcome the skepticism of technology and begin to use this creator economy of over 15 million people today who are producing YouTube videos and gaining followings, who are BIPOC and LGBT, and give them the creative challenge, just like Sesame Street harnessed the power of television to create a new dynamic of uh, of tools to protect the ocean, to protect wildlife, to course correct the climate questions from this artificial bend that we've had over the century, and give storytelling tools to influence peers, generations under you who will turbocharge those things, use friends in Hollywood and Silicon Valley and Madison Avenue, where the advertising industry is. Let's figure out a way to harness this technology today to really make a difference in solving a lot of these problems, which by analogy are similar to many of the problems which existed before. Thanks very much.